It was a Tuesday morning in early autumn when Daniel found himself wandering down the quieter side streets of his city. The sky was pale and overcast, the kind of weather that made everything feel softer, quieter, as if the world had turned the volume down. He had just left another open mic night that had gone wrong. His guitar strings had snapped mid-song, the small audience had clapped politely but without interest, and the coffee shop owner had whispered a half-hearted, "Maybe next time, kid." Music had been Daniel's dream for as long as he could remember. Not the fame, not the flashing lights, just the pure, wordless magic of sound filling the air and touching someone's soul. But dreams didn't pay rent, and lately it seemed they didn't even cover groceries. He passed by a pawn shop he'd never noticed before. Its window was dusty, the glass streaked from rain. Inside, cluttered shelves leaned under the weight of forgotten things, cameras with broken straps, watches that no longer ticked, rings dulled by time. And then he saw it. In the far corner of the display, resting in a cracked leather case, was a violin. Its wood was the color of warm honey, and even from outside the glass, Daniel could tell it had been cared for, or at least once had been. The curves of its body caught the dim light, and for reasons he couldn't explain, Daniel's chest tightened. He stepped inside. The shop smelled faintly of metal and dust, the air heavy with stories of objects long separated from their owners. The man behind the counter looked up from a newspaper. "That violin," Daniel said, nodding toward the display. "How much?" The man shrugged. 100 even. It's been sitting there for months. Nobody plays violins anymore. Kids want keyboards, electric guitars. That thing's old." Daniel hesitated. $100 was nearly all he had left until his next paycheck. He didn't even play the violin. At least not well. But something inside him whispered that this was no ordinary instrument. He opened the case. The velvet lining was faded and worn, but the violin itself seemed to hum with a quiet dignity. There was a faint engraving on the underside, almost worn away. E. Whitford, 1973. "Who's E. Whitford?" Daniel asked. The shopkeeper shook his head. "No idea. Came in from an estate sale. You want it or not?" Against his better judgment, Daniel bought it. That night, in his small apartment, he set the violin on his kitchen table. He cleaned the strings, polished the wood, and tightened the bow. When he played his first hesitant note, the sound was warmer than he expected, rich, almost aching. It was like the violin wanted to be heard again. Over the next few days, Daniel practiced in every spare moment. The instrument seemed to guide him, as if the music was stored inside it, waiting to be released. One evening, curious about its history, he searched the name E. Whitford online. He found old newspaper clippings, photos in black and white. Edward Whitford had been a child prodigy in the 1970s, a violinist whose performances brought audiences to tears. But then, around the age of 25, he vanished from the music world. Rumors swirled, stage fright, injury, personal tragedy. Nobody seemed to know for sure. The more Daniel learned, the more he felt connected to Whitford. Here was someone who had soared higher than most could dream, and yet for some reason had stopped. Daniel thought of his own moments of doubt, of almost giving up entirely. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel found himself in a cafe, violin case beside him. A group of older men and women were talking about local history, and when he mentioned the name Whitford, one of them, a silver-haired woman with sharp eyes, turned toward him. "Edward Whitford?" she said. "I used to hear him play when I was a teenager. That boy could silence a room with one note. But he quit after his wife died. Said the music hurt too much without her to hear it." Her voice softened. "We all thought it was a shame. But I guess everyone has to decide for themselves when the song ends." Daniel went home that night and stared at the violin. It hit him. This instrument had been silent for decades, not because it had lost its power, but because the one who played it had lost his reason. 2 weeks later, Daniel signed up for an open-air street performance downtown. It wasn't a stage, but it was something. The day was bright and breezy, the streets alive with the hum of conversation. He set up on a corner, violin in hand, and began to play. The first notes floated through the air, warm and deep. People slowed their steps. Some stopped. A little girl tugged at her mother's hand, pointing. Daniel closed his eyes and let the music pour out of him, imagining it was flowing not just from his fingers, but from Whitford's as well. By the end of the song, there was a small crowd. They clapped, not politely, but with genuine warmth. Someone dropped a 20 into his open case. Another asked if he had a CD. Daniel felt something shift inside him. This wasn't fame or fortune, but it was connection. It was proof that his music mattered, even if it reached only a handful of people at a time. Over the next months, he kept playing. Cafes, farmers markets, art fairs, anywhere that would have him. The violin seemed to respond to his determination, its voice growing more vibrant with each performance. One day after a show, a man in his 60s approached. "That's a fine instrument you've got there," he said. "Where'd you get it?" Daniel told him the story. The man smiled faintly. "I knew Edward. We played together once long ago." Something about those words made Daniel's throat tighten. The violin wasn't just his anymore. It was a bridge between past and present, between a dream that had been abandoned and one that was still alive.